Nerd Stalker Tech Week podcast. I'm Greg Valoria, aka Social Greg, and you are?
I am Adolfo Ferranda at Nerd Stalker.
Cool. Hey, Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year, man. Welcome back. It's the 10th today, and depending on where you're listening or watching, it could be any other day. So, the magic of the internet.
Magic. What's this first one about? Why Apple is in no hurry to sell its iPhone lawsuits?
Right. So this one comes from CNN Money from a cat named Philip Elmer DeWitt. So what he does is he works for Deutsche Bank, right? This guy named Chris Whitmore, who wrote a letter to his clients on Monday that lists 4 possible scenarios for outcomes to the patent wars being fought in courts right now around the world between Apple and Google. Right, in terms of the Android ecosystem, in relation to that. So number one, he says it's to settle with per unit license fee paid to Apple, which would be in Apple's interest, right? Number 2 would be a more favorable outcome where Apple handicaps Android feature set and or distribution and captures 25% of Android's future market share is the projection.
No kidding.
Or 3, it's a neutral, kind of a stalemate with no winner. And 4, Apple loses and must pay the counterclaim. Now, the thing is, you can tell in this letter that he's banking on number 1 and 2 actually happening as he further sort of progresses and notes to his clients in this note saying, in outcome number 1, he's saying a settlement where Apple licenses its intellectual property for about $10 per Android device sold could add, according to Whitmore's calculations, roughly $35 to Apple's share price. I mean, this is massive, payout. This is like we're getting in Microsoft territory, right? Here.
We'll just wait till Android becomes really freaking popular.
Yeah, exactly. So you wonder why manufacturers are running away from Android to some extent, or hedging, I should say. So outcome number 2 is now where Android's feature set or ability to distribute is diminished, considerably less likely, but the payoff could be enormous. If Apple were to capture 25% of future anticipated Android market, for example, Whitmore estimates that Apple's share price could grow by roughly $260 per share. As a result, he concludes they suspect Apple's unlikely to settle cheaply, right? Apple investors, meanwhile, should sit tight is what he's saying. According to Whitmore, they're gaining exposure to a potentially very lucrative, favorable IP outcome for little or no cost. So it looks like a win-win for Apple, according to this Deutsche analyst here.
Interesting.
So speaking of Apple, Greg, what do you got? You're asking Apple asked Chinese companies to cease production plans for Steve Jobs figurine claim.
Oh, this was hilarious. I saw the tweet from 9 to 5 Mac. I followed them, and it was from the Telegraph, which is a UK based media source, right? And they said that basically. Apple is asking to cease production of these 12-inch figurines. And as I did the backstories for all this thing and research, it was just hilarious going through this. So they said the 12-inch figurine, which comes complete with Jobs' trademark blue jeans, sneakers, and black turtleneck sweater, was created by a Chinese company called In Icons and was set for release in February. But their efforts have reportedly met with a legal challenge from Apple's legal counsel, allegedly threatening to sue the toy maker unless they cease trading. And in another interview from ABC News, the In Icons Tandy Chiang, he loves actually Steve Jobs. I mean, I guess he loves him enough to make some money, but anyway, it loves him that much. He said that the company will not stop production in lieu of Apple's request, saying the technology company cannot copyright Jobs' appearance.
Wow.
Apple can do it. So he quotes him, "Apple can do anything they like. I will not stop. We already started production. Steve Jobs is not an actor. He's just a celebrity." That's interesting. I thought that was an interesting comment. There's no copyright protection for a normal person. Steve Jobs is not a product, so I don't think Apple has the copyright of him.
Wow.
So, and I thought, and this, I mean, I think everyone heard it. I just like to talk about it on this podcast because it's just kind of amazing is that, how much protection that Apple is giving Steve Jobs, even when he was alive. There was issues about that as well.
But we see a slew of these like Steve Jobs books coming out now,
Today in VentureBeat, Megyn Kelly actually wrote about the comic book for Steve Jobs.
Oh,
It actually goes through his whole history. But actually, what I thought the funny part of that story is that it didn't include his death, because the comic book went in production prior to his death.
Gosh.
And I thought that was kind of weird, because wow, I mean, what are they doing, using a Gutenberg press or something?
Right.
I mean, a manual Gutenberg press or something?
Yeah.
Well, let me lead you into the next one. Samsung versus Google. That was kind of interesting. I read up on that, and kind of tell the listeners about that one.
Good stuff. So this one comes from Monday Note blog, is what it's called, by Jean-Louis Gasset. It's a very interesting sort of thought piece here, and really neat sort of perception on the way things are going right now. So, what Jean-Louis is saying is that as we enter into 2012, it seems the game may be changing, right? So looking at last week's numbers for Motorola, when this post was made anyways, according to the state, numbers for Motorola and HTC and Samsung, we see a very different type of picture. Instead of the old, there's more, quote, there's more than enough room for every Android handset maker to be a winner, unquote. We have had a 3-horse race with a definitive leader, and that leader being Samsung now, while Motorola and HTC lag behind. So that brings up the question, leaves us with the potential for an interesting face-off, not Samsung versus Motorola HTC, but Samsung versus Google, right? As Eric Sherman observes in his CBS Money Watch post, since Samsung ships close to 55% of all Android phones, they got a big leg up here, and the company could be in a position to twist Google's arm if last quarter's trend continue. If Motorola and HTC lose even more ground, Samsung's bargaining position will become even stronger. But what's Samsung's bargaining position?
Yeah, exactly.
What could they want? Perhaps more search referral money is what he's asking. Dollars flowing through Google search engine is used on the smartphone, right? Earlier access to Android releases possibly, and maybe even a share of revenue, the advertising revenue, which is Google's bread and butter, right? So will Google let Samsung gain the upper hand is the question here. Not likely is what he says, or at least not for the long term. There's the thing is that there's Motorola, which is about to become a fully owned but, quote, independent Google subsidiary, right? A Googlerola vertically integrated smartphone line could counterbalance Samsung's influence in theory. And so it would be Samsung's move, and they would be defenseless, supposedly, right? But you also have to consider the Kindle Fire example. Just like Amazon picked the Android lock, Samsung could grab the Android open source code and create its own unlicensed but fully legal smartphone operating system and still benefit from a portion of Android applications. Or it could build its own app store the way Amazon did. Samsung, he says, is already showing related inclinations with its Music Hub and its iMessage competitor. So, Greg, what's this next story you got here? Fake Siri arrives on the Android market.
Oh, yeah, right at the end of the year, it was kind of hilarious. I was watching my tweets, then Uber Gizmo kind of caught my eye. So basically, Uber Gizmo, really good, some articles out of there by George Wong. He reported that, one of the problems with the Android market is the lack of app moderation, as we talked about before in other podcasts. Tons of fake apps are loaded on a daily basis, right? Yeah. And usually pulled only when the apps are found to be malicious or infringing on copyrights, but it usually takes a while for, Google to catch all that. But one of the latest apps to join this fake app parade comes from a developer called Official App, which is no doubt designed to fool inexperienced Android users, right? So the developer recently put an app up, during that time that had the real Siri logo on the Android market and fooling people it was a real thing. And the hilarious part about it wasn't even a Siri clone. I mean, basically it launches Google Voice.
Oh, wow. Oh, gosh.
It was just hilarious. So that happened on the 30th, or actually I think it launched on the 28th, and then by the 30th, Google, I probably heard all these stories and removed it. And so I saw the next tweet by the Next Web, which has really good content as well. Yeah. They said, that was actually pulled on the 30th, and they were a lot more rapid to act. But, the issue really is that these apps come onto the store, they're not moderated like the iTunes store, and They just appear, and basically they're always playing catch up, right?
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
the issue with it. Anyway, what I saw this tweet this week. Ubuntu TV and Opera making its debut at CES.
Yeah. So speaking of CES,
basically a lot shorter than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
The release.
Yeah. So this little blurb comes from Engadget and Terrence O'Brien of Terrence O'Brien of Engadget. He mentions that Canonical's Mark Shuttleworth promised back a while ago that Ubuntu would come to televisions eventually, but we never expected it to arrive so quickly, is what he said. A concept preview is here at CES for convention goers to get their eyes on, and they'll be swinging through the company's booth to get some hands-on. You can see a video of it, which we'll post on Nerdstalker. Also, take a look at it. It's very interesting. For now, it's largely a tech demo and concept, but there are already some neat features on display, like a 3D dash, searchable guide, and streaming video applications. The goal, the company says, is to, quote, uncomplicate television by removing as much as the paraphernalia that accompanies it, primarily the boxes and cables, right? So a lot of these other types of solutions require some sort of like dongle or an actual box itself. You know, we think of Boxy or the Roku box or something like that.
Yeah.
These guys are strictly going to be embedded in the television. They're going to be open source. They're going to be free to use, right? For the for the OEMs, I'm assuming here, since it's open source, right, or whatever. And not only that, I think Opera is doing something similar, but in a browser, all HTML5. So these are all platforms right now, and I think we're going to see a ton of these things popping up. It has that same sort of experience as something, like I said, like a Boxy application. If you've ever installed Boxy Local or XBMC or something like that, you see your typical sort of like, lean back sort of experience and that kind of thing. So it's an interesting proposition. We'll post a video. Really cool stuff.
So now this has to get embedded into a TV that has the capability of embedding this type of application, or
yeah, since this is Ubuntu, right? It's they will have to I believe install something. Ubuntu is a Linux operating system, and this is a Linux. I would imagine it's a Linux flavor of this type of solution, probably running on the operating system. So this operating system, I would assume, need to be installed or somehow embedded in a tiny, some embedded operating system type of way into a television. But we'll see. So hey, man,
nice.
What is about? Speaking of televisions, what is this rumor that we're hearing here?
Well, I think everyone's been talking about what's a threat to Netflix, right? They had some gaffes last year, and people started really kind of talking about them. Maybe it was good PR for Netflix, but usually it was bad PR. They did a lot of interesting things last year, but everyone's been touting as Amazon being the threat to Netflix because of content, right? Well, this story from Media Post blogs by Daisy Whitney, the title is "Rumored Apple TV Could Be a Real Threat to Netflix." So, she goes on to suggest that, making some compelling argument that Apple has already done a fantastic job convincing consumers they must have products they never needed before. So to be sure, Apple TV didn't quite take off as hoped, but that's a set-top box. If this iTV comes to fruition, which, all the rumors say it's a 32, 37-inch with embedded, Apple operating system, as we just talked about before with Ubuntu,
right?
It could be the next iteration of what Apple has done well, make new screens for new experiences. So, what they're saying is that, possibly the key would be turning whatever TV Apple makes into a development platform for content providers, which makes a heck of a lot of sense.
Wow.
Let other people develop apps for iTV and just provide the platform for it, just like they did with iPhone and the iPad. So, we're on the Apple kick in this entry Nerdstalker podcast for 2012.
Right.
And it looks like Target's getting into the Apple Act, my friend, right?
Yeah. So as we know now, Apple currently has a sort of partnership with Best Buy, right? And that has to do with like their early partnerships with Sears, Circuit City, Computer City, and Office Max, which are all sort of dead, right? Deadpool kind of, or terminated relationships. They went with Best Buy. Best Buy doesn't have the biggest spread of stores. I believe it's somewhere in the range of 600 stores, right? And they have these mini sort of Apple experiences where Best Buy actually sells Apple computers and things like that, which is pretty unheard of. They're very control, orientated in that regard. they have a pre-existing relationship with Target, and where they've let Target sell the iPod actually for some time now, and then they eventually let them. I believe they're selling iPads too, but what they've never done is allowed them to sell computers, right? The only other sort of third-party vendor or whatever was that could do that in-store retailer, and was Best Buy, right? So now what they're doing is they're trying out something in with 25 larger Target stores in various locations, which can't support a local, standalone Apple store. So what they're saying here is, this is Daniel Aaron Dilger of Apple Insider, is he's saying the initial opening will be a small start, given that Target, the second largest discount retail chain in the U.S., operates 1,752 stores in the U.S. Apple has opened 359 of its own retail stores globally, 245 of which are in the U.S. So it says it's going to allow them to open, a store within a store type of thing. So we shall see. If this thing works out, we could see quite a huge spread of more opportunities for Apple to sell more things. It's weird when you think about it, because you think Apple has they're doing massive sales already, but then you hear things like, oh, they're just about to sell the iPhone, the new iPhone 4S, whatever, in China, for instance, right? And you're like, whoa, they haven't scaled that far out. So the growth potential is huge, right, for this, and with domestically too. I mean, if they could get to those areas where they don't have Apple stores and there's these pre-existing sort of Target locations, the sky's the limit. Speaking of reaching for employees, how can I get a job at Facebook or Quora? Greg?
Oh, this is cool. So last week, I thought this was really cool. Basically, it's marketing PR meets recruiting. So last week, Tech Cocktail, Kira Newman, tweeted out, 2-day coding contest to win interviews at Facebook, Quora, and more, and of course I'm going to click that thing because I want to find out what the more is. So it turns out that a 48-hour coding competition called Code Sprint kicked off last week, open to everyone. The competition asks you to solve programming problems to win interviews at more than 65 companies, including Facebook, Quora, Amazon, Skype, Dropbox, Groupon, and Airbnb.
Wow.
And then basically when the tweet went out on Wednesday, which was, I believe, the 5th, the participants could browse the available companies and choose which to apply to. I mean, it's pretty cool. And additional to theoretical problems, the competition also focused on real-world problems that interviewing companies have solved. As for the languages, you're looking at C, C++, C#, Java, Python, Perl, PHP, Ruby. I mean, all of them.
Scala, yeah. You're right.
I mean, but I thought, again, what the marvelous move was by a recruiter called Interview Street was really to mix this kind of contest gaming PR thing with interviews. And, in this valley right now, or SF Tech, it's hard to find developers.
Yeah, I mean, it's super competitive.
It is really hard to find developers. Right. So I think it was a great move from a marketing PR standpoint to really go kind of, on the edge and create a contest to get, great applicants, right? They're pre-qualified.
Clever.
If you can solve the problem, right?
Yeah, it has a very sort of guerrilla marketing type of feel to it. Yeah, way to go.
Yeah, I liked it. That caught my eye, so I think I had to bring this up on the podcast. So
cool.
So yeah, okay. The next thought piece, I think you had tweeted out this last week, is basically a thought piece about the Windows Phone and who's buying it and is it really going to succeed? Right?
Yeah. So this one comes from the New York Times from a writer named Nick Winfield. He asked, about the Windows Phone. He's saying it's really neat. Sort of, it gives a history of sort of Windows Phone and why they're sort of at, sort of a theory of why they're at where they are right now, And so he said essentially they were getting, several years ago, they were getting killed by RIM and Apple when they had what it was, Windows Mobile, right? And it looked essentially like Windows on a phone. It looked really horrible. In fact, it even had a little start menu at the time on the phone, and it was just getting decimated, right? So they had this meeting at Microsoft. Right. And this meeting, I think they called it Cage Match or something like that, where they got the Windows mobile team together and they said, "Look, what can we do to fight off these guys? Can we iterate on this existing sort of this code base, or can we save some of it, or God forbid, do we scrap everything and start from scratch? Well, they came to the conclusion that it's, that they need to scrap everything, that they really could not compete unless they scrap everything and start from scratch, that it was completely unusable.
Interesting.
And what this did is this set them 2 years behind. Not only that, Android was just about coming on, and what it did, it gave Google the opportunity to partner with a lot of established partnerships with all these OEMs, right? These third-party vendors and stuff, and these other manufacturers, which traditionally had went to Microsoft, right? Always, Microsoft owned OEMs basically, right? And it was assumed, look at Windows, period, absolutely. Right? So what this did also was actually next Microsoft, he said he compared this sacrifice to the movie where the guy gets his arm stuck in the boulders, right? Getting your arm stuck in a boulder for 2 years, in between the boulders for 2 years, right? Before you chew it off or cut it off, right?
Oh my god!
So, and also, this author says, the writer says, unlike Apple, Microsoft didn't make their own hardware, and they paid for it initially, but now Microsoft has put requirements to manufacturers, because before they didn't. So the initial rollout of Windows Phone and all the rave reviews of the beautiful design were all great and fine and dandy, but then their first phones to roll out didn't have any requirements to these third-party manufacturers, so they performed kind of weird. They were sort of cheap and crappy and plasticky, a lot of them.
Wow.
And so in the next rev, they said, look, you guys have to have X amount of processor, X amount of RAM, and put these requirements on the manufacturer. Some of them said, whatever, don't need to prioritize this, since Android lets them do whatever they want, and they're coming on super strong, and their sales are kicking butt. So there was no real incentive. And and Apple, they own the whole vertical, right? So they're sitting pretty, right? So this puts Microsoft in a really weird, awkward position, right? So they rev the phone, Windows Phone. It got better, with all this quicker updates, and then getting a better relationship, and then Nokia partnership, But they're 2 years behind of everything. So what they say here, the conclusion here is that they need a blockbuster this year, right? Or they're going to be they're essentially going to be dead in the mobile operating system space. So a very fascinating sort of behind the scenes story about what's happening with these guys.
Yeah. I mean, when you went to the conference, I was kind of excited because I saw some of the things that you were tweeting out, and I went and saw some of the marketing PR pieces on their future vision of the operating system on mobile devices as well as desktop devices. Kind of an interconnectivity, you would say, and it was really cool, kind of like this 3D thing going around, and almost like holographic effects eventually. Where you could use that to collaborate and really, rock the Windows world with these icon like structures. And you had told me that you really liked the interface.
Yeah, I really loved Windows Phone. It put the company, Microsoft, in such a desperate position that they had to do something different, and something innovative, which it really did. I know the initial designers, who are most of which are no longer with Microsoft, got inspiration from like European and subway signs that are very sort of stark typography, right? Very clear and concise.
Right.
And Bomber, there was a story of Bomber initially seeing it for the first time and noticing that I think it was the month, something like January or something, was kind of going off the screen, and he made them sort of like change that kind of thing. He had these little things, but he just sort of begrudgingly sort of took it, right? And then they saw success with that. And what's interesting is there's this guy Joe Bellafiore who's been with Microsoft for a very long time, and he's sort of the engineering sort of side, but he's sort of taken the lead on this whole thing. In fact, he was on the defunct Zune team as well, which had a very similar look to Windows Phone, right? Which is a beautiful interface. It just was way too late and all this also, right? So they suffer from this pattern. But what they did is they let him also put this sort of design upon Windows 8. So you're seeing these big risks, right, that Microsoft is taking, which is very interesting. My concern is that now they're focusing so much on hardware and performance kind of stuff that I wonder if they're going to keep innovating with design. We saw the death of the Mix conference, is what people are saying, because they haven't said anything about it. And then we see Build, which is a much more sort of like a development-centric sort of gigantic conference about like you need to develop for Windows 8, all you engineers, and we're back to this again, right? So I don't know if they're learning from their past mistakes or not here. All right, it's tip time.
Tip time, tip time, tip time. So this is Social Greg's tip. As my tip, I think you should look at the Roku streaming stick, which makes a regular TV, well, digital TV, into a smart TV. And this was by Real SEO, which really does a lot of content on video. You should check them out. So it's cool. It plugs into a non-smart TVs. We were talking about embedded operating systems earlier. Well, TVs don't have to do it, but it has to be a digital TV, into the TV's HDMI port. And then basically it has wireless, connectivity in it. So basically you could, it'll be used just like a Roku. And you don't have any wires.
Awesome.
How's that?
Yeah.
Isn't
Very
that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do the magic of science.
Very slick, man.
Yeah. So, Roku content, remember, has Netflix and Hulu. So a lot of content out there for you guys.
Awesome.
So. And $50, $50 versus $1,500 maybe for ITV is the target, right? So
interesting.
Good alternative.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we need to throw away TVs like this behind me.
No, not yet.
Anytime soon.
So my tip is actually an Android app. It's called Boycott SOPA. So as you know, SOPA is the Stop Online Privacy Act, which is a complete joke and farce, and everyone should call their legislators and their representatives and tell them that they are against it. But what this Android app is it's a free Android application you can use to scan barcodes to help identify if the product are either created by or intimately related to SOPA supporting companies. There are currently over 800 brands and companies in their list. The list is currently being used by the application, is available on their website. The application will help you identify goods of companies which, according to publicly available sources, appear to have been supporting SOPA as of approximately January 5th, but they're revving that all the time. It's intended as an aid to identify such products that should not be relied upon. You should carry out your own check, is what they're saying here, in case any product this app indicates is a product of a company is supporting SOPA is not. So visit their URL at their website at nomoresopa.com for more information and download it for your Android phone.
Nice.
What I'll announce here is that we are actually been chosen to be a media partner for the Node Summit. So let me tell you a little bit about the Node Summit. The Node Summit is a 2-day conference at the Mission Bay Conference Center in San Francisco, January 4th to January 25th of this year. Please check them out. It's at nodesummit.com for more information. There's going to be a lot of amazing speakers there. The creator of Node himself is going to be there. Startups, engineers, everyone should check this thing out. It's an up-and-coming technology that is here, and it's coming on very strong, especially if you're into HTML5 or anything like that. You really should check it out. It's gonna change things quite a bit, and this is going to be a very interesting conference to start off this whole movement here.
Can I go?
Yeah. We will be there.
Please.
So what else is going on, man, with our old
cool.
buddies at SF New Tech?
Oh, yeah. Well, I met with Miles this week. We planned out 2012. There's going to be some pretty exciting shows coming up. But the first one of 2012 will be Meet and See Tethras, IQ Engines, Cappy, heard about, and RAVN. Okay, thanks for letting me do this, because I can hardly pronounce these things, and I thought they were like bands.
I just wanted to hear him say Cappy. Cappy.
Cappy, thank you. I sound so good about that. Yeah. Anyway, but doors open at 5:30 at 119 Utah Street, San Francisco, at the Mighty. The
usual
club.
Free tacos and amazing technology and startups.
And I'll be doing the Ustream as usual for 2012. Our company B-Tracks will do the Ustream, and I'll do the pre-show with some interviews, introduce some of the people presenting, and and we'll just have some fun with it. So it'll be really cool.
Yeah. So people, don't forget to please contribute to the show. You can contribute our stories that we will talk about, your stories as well. To use the hashtag on Twitter, NRDSTK. Also, check us out at nerdstalker.com, and on iTunes, you can subscribe to our audio or video podcast and give us a rating. That always helps out too. And look us up on YouTube. Do a search for Nerd Stalker TV, all one word, Nerd Stalker TV on YouTube. And so, Greg, how do we get a hold of you?
Hey, you can get a hold of me on Twitter, Greg Gloria, at Social Greg, right there. And you can reach me on email at socialgregsf@gmail.com. And you, Adolfo?
Cool. You can email me at adolfo@nerdstalker.com, and you can find me at Twitter at nerdstalker. So thanks for joining us, everyone. You're very cool.
Yeah, be careful out there.
I pay you top dollar for this crap, this insubordination.
Well, I'm a rebel.
You're a ruble, a Russian ruble.
I'm a rebel, real Russian rebel.
Russian ruble, Russian currency.
Rebel.